Hey traders, John Fortune here with this week's Weekly Forex Forecast for the 11th of May to the 15th of May 2020. As always, we're going to start off by looking at the US dollar index and crude oil before running through a number of markets, looking at the key levels of support and resistance in the process. I'm also going to be highlighting some of the targets that we're going to be looking for in this coming weekend, also for the weeks ahead. So I hope you're having a nice weekend. Let's jump over to the charts and see where the money is this week. As always, we're going to start off by looking at the US dollar index. Now, last week we noted the fact that we had a new low here for the first time in a number of weeks in the dollar index. We were coiling and then we did start to make a new low to the downside. And this was an indication we should be looking for further declines to the downside in the dollar index after a short correction. We did correct and we pulled back to the 100.18 last week before selling off. So very simply put, going into this week, we are looking for further declines to the downside in the dollar index. Any pullback in this area is going to be viewed as an opportunity to start to look for further declines down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 98.12. So going into next week, what this means is that we are looking for further declines in the dollar index, and therefore we go into next week with a bearish bias on the US dollar. So next market we're going to look at is crude oil. Now last week we highlighted the 19.29 as an area to look for a pullback in crude oil, previous broken support looking to turn resistance. We did pull back and we did test this area. We have not yet had any reversals to the downside. However, going into next week, this is now a great place to start to look for potential reversals and bearish setups in crude oil. And if we get a breakout to the downside, if we start to see some nice bearish reversal patterns in this area, this is going to be a great place to start to look for short positions. And we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 9.37. So next market we're going to look at is euro dollar. Now last week we highlighted the 1.0805 as a key area of support to look for a pullback to. We did get a pullback towards this area and we started to bounce from the 1.08050 last week. So very simply put, now we have this pullback. This is a great place going into next week to start to look for bullish setups. And if we get the right kind of bullish setups in this area, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.1052. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 1.1148. So the next market we're going to look at is pound dollar. Now last week we highlighted the 1.2253, and this is an area we've highlighted in previous videos, and you can see we already had a bounce once in previous weeks from this area to the upside. We did come back towards this key area last week. We didn't quite test it, but now we've had this pullback to the downside. Any further pullback in this area is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to start to look for bullish setups. And if we get the right kind of bullish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.2728. So next market we're going to look at is US dollar Japanese yen. Now last week we highlighted the fact that the US dollar Japanese yen had pulled back and retested on the underside a key area of broken support, turning resistance at the 107 and 380, and we're looking further declines to the downside. We did get a nice sell-off from this area last week, and we came very close to achieving our target last week of the 105.86, but we haven't quite achieved it just yet. So very simply put, going into this week, we're still looking for further declines once again in this market to the downside. What we'd like to see is if we could come back and retest broken support from the past, turning resistance once again at the 106.88. This is going to be a great place going into next week to start to look for bearish setups. And if we get the right kind of bearish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set from last week at the 105.86. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and target 2 at the 104.62. So the next market we're going to look at is Aussie dollar. Now last week we were looking for further advances to the upside in this market, and we did highlight the fact we had a nice correction back down towards broken resistance, looking to turn support at the 0.63320. For anybody involved last week, we came very close to the target set at the 0.6582, so this would just be a case of risk managing this and just being patient. For anybody not involved from last week with long positions, what we would like to see, if we are going to look once again for long positions in Aussie dollar, because we're coming quite close to the target here, is any further correction or pullback into this area will provide us with the opportunity to start to look for bullish setups once again. And if we get this kind of price action and we get a pullback once again, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set from last week, the 0.6582. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 0.6650. The next market we're going to be looking at is New Zealand dollar. Now last week we highlighted the 0.60050 as an area to look for a pullback and a bounce to the upside. We did actually pull back and we tested this again almost to the pip here before bouncing to the upside and rallying towards the target set last week at 0.61950. So very simply put, going into this week, once again, very similar to Aussie dollar, anybody involved from last week just needs to risk manage this and be patient, looking to achieve the target set from last week at the 0.61950. For anybody not involved or any new positions, what we would like to see is we're starting to come close to the target now, is any pullback in this area, any correction which gives us better risk to reward potential up towards the target set from last week. This is going to be viewed as an opportunity once again to start to look for bullish setups. And if we get the right kind of bullish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set from last week, at the 0.61950. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2, at the 0.6302. So the next market we're going to look at is US dollar Swiss franc. Now last week we highlighted the 0.97290 as an area to look for a pullback and a reversal to the downside in US dollar Swiss franc. We did get a pullback and the 0.97290 was actually just about here, and you can see we started to trade above it before reversing. We reversed, or we started to break to the downside and bounce from this area before making a new high. So once again, this just confirms that we are still looking for further declines to the downside in this market, although we've adjusted the level for this week by about 15 pips. Very simply put, going into this week, what we'd like to see is, for anybody not involved to the downside last week, any pullback in this area and a retest of the broken support from the past, turning resistance once and possibly twice this week at the 0.9747. This is going to be viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bearish setups in this market, and we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside of the target set at the 0.9503. So next market we're going to look at is US dollar CAD. Now last week we highlighted the 1.4152 as an area to look for a pullback and a reversal to the downside. We noted that this was actually a confluence area of this downtrend and also this horizontal level, and we did tag this level and we turned to the pip at the 1.4152 before declining, pulling back, retesting this area and declining once again. This is a very good example of why we generally speaking don't use trend lines, because we prioritize the horizontal lines, because you see here this by some could be viewed as a false breakout. Starts to break out if you're not looking at the correct horizontal lines. What happens is you see this breakout of this downtrend and then it starts to decline, but really all this was a retest of the key area of broken support, turning resistance once, twice at the 1.41520. But either way, we did start to get a decline to the downside from this area. So very simply put, going into this week, we are still looking for further declines. Anybody not involved with shorts from last week in this market, what we would like to see for new positions is any pullback in this area away from the target is going to be viewed as an opportunity once again to start to look for bearish setups. And we're going to be looking at initiating shorts once again down towards the next key of support to the downside in the target set from last week at the 1.3734. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside in target 2 at the 1.3468. And last but not least, we have gold. Now, last week we highlighted the fact that we are overall looking further advances to the upside in this market. Very similar to what we looked at previously in the dollar index, we are actually starting to coil. That is to say, we are making lower highs and we're also making higher lows. So gold at the moment is in this coiling pattern and it needs a little bit of room. So if you start to trade in between, for example, if you start to take long and short positions within this pattern, you may find that you start to get chopped up a bit. So what we'd really like to see in these kind of scenarios is we'd really like to see a break of the highs, the previous highs or lows, which is over here to the upside or here to the downside first. And if we can come down and break the low, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking for a pullback down towards the 163614, and this would be our opportunity to start to look for bullish setups in this market. And if we get this kind of price action, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 1763.05. So that is it from me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far, and also for those of you who comment on the channel on a regular basis as well. I want to wish you all a nice weekend, and I want to wish you all the best with your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care, and don't forget to trade safely.